Welcome, everyone, to a meeting of the Boston Region MPO Planning Organization. My name is David Moeller. I represent Secretary Philip Ing here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostron_non_discrimination. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Qureshi of the MPO staff at iqurishi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Others remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and it will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
Certainly. Mascot seat 1.
This is David Moeller.
Mascot seat 2.
Mike the Lowdowns here.
Welcome. Mascot Highway Division. I will circle back. Next is the MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnson representing the MBTA.
Good morning. Next is the Regional Transportation Authority's Metro West Transit Authority.
Jim Nee for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority.
Morning. Next is Massport.
Hi, good morning. This is Sarah Lee from Massport.
Hey, good morning. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Good morning. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Hannah Spolikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Hannah. Also acknowledging John Romano, who shared a message. Next, Advisory Council.
Good morning, Caitlin Ellen Conley, Advisory Council here. Thank you.
Morning, thank you. Next we have City of Boston, seat 1.
Jen Rowe, City of Boston.
Hello, Jen. City of Boston, seat 2.
Patrick Hoey, C2, City of Boston.
Welcome. At-large city, City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor Van Campen in the City of Everett.
Good morning. At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Mark Laredo in the City of Newton.
Good morning. At-large town of Arlington.
Leonard Dickens, Town of Arlington here.
Welcome, Len. At-large town of Brookline.
Good morning, Robert Guptill, representing Commissioner Shute and Char Bernard Green for the town of Brookline.
Good morning. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, this is Brad Rawson with the City of Somerville, representing the Intercore subregion.
Good morning. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Lexington.
Good morning, this is Megan Roach, representing Select Board Chair Jill Hay for the Magic subregion.
Morning. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. Not see Dennis at the moment. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Yes, Darlene Wynn here, representing Mayor Michael Cahill for the North Shore Task Force.
Hello. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Good morning. This is John Strauss representing James Tigas, Select Board Chair of the Town of Burlington and the North Suburban Planning Council.
Good morning. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hall. Let's see Chris at the moment. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson, representing Chairman Gallo and the Town of Rentham and the SWAP area.
Welcome. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the Town of Norwood, representing the Trick sub-region. And just a heads up, I'm going to have to leave around 11 o'clock, at which point I'll hand it over to Steve Olenoff.
Thank you. Understood. And welcome. Federal Highway Administration.
Anthony Jones for Federal Highway Administration.
Thank you and welcome. Is there anyone in today's meeting I have not called on the roll? If not, that is back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one today, so we'll go directly to the executive director's report. Kagan?
Thank you, David, and hi, everyone. If you go to the next slide, please. I have a few announcements today, and then we'll just touch on, as always, today's agenda and the next meeting date. So if you could advance the slide, please. So first, just wanted to thank everybody for responding to the long-range transportation plan scenario planning workshop survey. Based on the majority of the responses we saw, we will host an in-person workshop on Tuesday, June 16th from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon at the State Transportation Building, Conference Room 1. We would very much value participation. I won't be able to see you there because I'll be out of town, but it'll be a great exercise, and I hope many of you can attend. And just as a reminder, Conference Room 1 is not the same as the Transportation Board Room, which is where we normally host our in-person / hybrid meetings. So please do, if you're not sure what that is, you can ask security in the second floor lobby for directions or find staff who will be there to help you get to the room. You do not have to go through security to get to the conference room itself, though, so please don't do that. But if you have any questions or accommodation needs, please let us know in advance. Before we advance the slide, I actually have a few more updates that didn't make it into the slides around some of our engagement activities that are very timely at the moment. First of all, I wanted to highlight for this board that I was able to present yesterday to a group of planners and advocates from across the state about the role that this MPO plays in advancing complete streets projects. It was a Transportation for Massachusetts Champions Institute program event, and that is intended to foster connections between change makers across the state and public officials, kind of foster that collaboration between the two. So my presentation actually came after an initial presentation about the potential impacts of the current draft of the reauthorization, the BUILD Act, which the chair mentioned at our last meeting. And it was a great quick summary, and it flagged that there are some potential decreases in dedicated funding source for some types of projects like trails and complete streets. So even though those were that was some news people were not that excited to hear, it was a nice segue because then I could emphasize all the ways that this board and staff channel really hundreds of millions of dollars over 5 years to improve safety and mobility with attention to the most vulnerable roadway users. So I was glad to be able to kind of celebrate the work that you all do and the funding that we're able to allocate to these much needed projects. And we had a great conversation and people expressed a lot of appreciation to the MPO and the presentation. The other update I wanted to give you all is that we're in the midst of a very busy time right now for engagement around the agency's No Heat project, which I've mentioned in the past. It's funded from a state grant source, and it's exploring how people walk, bike, and roll experience extreme heat. So in the first phase that I've reported on, we made a fine-grained data set that allowed us to look at and target kind of very specific spots to pilot heat relief interventions. And now we've begun to install those interventions. And later today, we'll be at a Revere Middle School. And staff will be talking about the project with a group of 7th and 8th graders and leading a walk audit with Walk Massachusetts, or Walk Mass. So I look forward to in the future summarizing the full impact of this work to the board. It's been a really exciting time engaging with nonprofit organizations, advocates, students, and municipal staff and other agencies to get these projects going. All right, next. Yes, and it is 90 degrees today, so it is a good day to be talking about this project. Next slide, please. So for today, hopefully you're all aware and ready. We will ask you all to vote to endorse the federal fiscal year 27 to 31 Transportation Improvement Program TIP. That's the MPO's capital plan. We will share with you anything that we received during the public comment period, which is now concluded. And if endorsed, this TIP would take effect on October 1st. We also have an amendment to the 26 to 30 TIP. Ethan will present on both of these topics. The amendment involves funding 2 new projects, and he'll give you the details of those. And then there will be an introduction to the federal certification review that we have kicked off with our federal partners. So Anthony Jones from the Federal Highway Administration is going to give you all some context and overview of the certification review process, which we undergo every 4 years. And he'll talk about what phase we're in and how you all can engage in that process. And then lastly, we'll have an introduction to the long-range transportation plan scenario planning. This is a kind of a preview, a preamble to the workshop that I just mentioned earlier that will be in person on Tuesday, June 16th. And Aaron McGuire and Marty Milkovitz will be presenting on that topic. Next slide, please. So the next meeting to have on your calendars is going to be June 18th, 2026 at 10 o'clock a.m. It will be hybrid as this one is. Sorry, not hybrid, virtual as this one is. And you will have a couple of additional important action items. One will be around our state fiscal year 2027 operating budget, as well as an action item on the federal fiscal year 2027 UPWP, our annual work program, following the conclusion of the public comment period for that document, which you've already released as a draft. There will be a couple other items, but those I wanted to draw your attention to. That is all I have.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is public comments. Are there any public comments at this time? Seeing none, if you have a comment you'd like to make during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Sam Taylor. Sam, are you unmuted?
He looks unmuted, but we're just not hearing sound, even though he looks unmuted.
There you go, Sam. Well, maybe not. I thought I heard you.
Good too.
All right, Sam, try again. And if you can't get unmuted, we'll skip your report. Excellent. Thanks, Sam. He just put his thing in the chat. He's going to share his update in the chat. So get the chance to look at Sam's update. And if you have any questions, chat back to him. Next item on the agenda. Oh, are there any other committee chairs reports at this time? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is a Community Advisory Council report. Caitlin?
Thank you. Our council hasn't met since the last meeting of the MPO, but I just wanted to emphasize the amazing work that the MPO staff is doing. Who manage the Community Advisory Council. We meet on a regular basis to take stock of what's happening in the meetings, think about lessons learned, and really continuous improvement on how we can continue to better engage with the folks that are on the council. So I just want to give a huge shout out to them and thank them for their incredible support. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Caitlin. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of May 7th, 2026. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? Please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Barassa with MAPC. I'll make the motion to approve the May 7th meeting minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Is there a second? Megan Roach.
Megan Roach, Town of Lexington. I will second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Michael O'Dowd,
Michael Dowd, yes.
John Romano, Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Jim Nee,
Jim Nee, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly,
Caitlin Allen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe abstain as I wasn't present.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey also abstained, not present.
understood, thank you. Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Robert Guptill,
Robert Guptill, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Arlene Wynn, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the federal fiscal year 2027 to 31 Transportation Improvement Program. Ethan LaPointe.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am a senior transportation planner on MPO staff. If we can please go on the next slide. This presentation this morning is to introduce, or reintroduce rather, the draft federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 Transportation Improvement Program. If we can go on to the next slide. This program was recently released for a 21-day public comment period back in early May, which conclude on May 29th. And given the conclusion of that public comment period, we're here before the board today at the end of this presentation to request a vote to endorse on the full program of projects and document for the 27 to 31 TIP. Today's presentation will start, as we typically do with these presentations, by reviewing some of the materials that have been provided for today, including a brief summary of any of the changes that have been made to the document or program of projects since the board voted to vote out the draft 2731 program versus what is being presented here today for your endorsement. This will also include a review of public and comments and engagement activities that were undertaken during TIP development, and again, culminating in that vote to endorse the draft TIP. If we can move on to the materials for today, there is on the calendar for this MPO meeting, a revised copy of the draft 2731 TIP document, including revisions to the TIP appendices. More sort of helpfully, if we can go on to the next slide, as staff have recently started doing with these sort of TIP cycles over the last few years, we have also provided a change tracker for MPO members to reference should they wish to compare the original document that was voted out for draft to the one being presented for endorsement here today. This change tracker outlines all changes proposed to the TIP between the draft and revised document, including section references and page number references as needed, along with various explanations. I will note before we get into specific changes that this year, unlike prior years, most of these changes are just general adjustments in nature around text. There are not many substantial changes to the program of projects or funding amounts, though there are a couple, which again, I'll call out specifically in this presentation. Without further ado, if we can go on to the next slide. And the next one, please. The two changes to the overall program of projects within the TIP fall within the statewide highway program and the transit program. The first change was a correction to a funding source listing for the Natick Lake Cochituate Path project in the statewide program, which had previously omitted certain statewide funding sources. There is no change to this project's overall budget or schedule or scope as a result of this, as this is just a clerical correction as to what the project was previously listed in Table 3-7 of Chapter 3. The second change is to Table 3-11 in the transit program for the Metro West RTA Revenue Vehicle Replacement Project. There has been a modest revision to the project's funding in federal fiscal year 27 from $600,000 to $364,891, all of which were concentrated in the state or local matching fund sources, along with, I believe, toll development credits. So just a small funding revision there for that project. And again, to reiterate, these are the only two project or project level changes that are proposed versus what the draft program looked like back in May and what is being brought before the board here today. We can go on to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, there are, of course, other changes that have been outlined in the tracker, including a few clarifications and corrections to ensure accuracy throughout the document. I will note that there are far fewer of those clarifications and corrections in this version of the document than you may be familiar with from previous years of TIP development, which is thanks to improvements that we've made to our document development process this year. I think last year we had about 120 changes. This year it's more like 25 changes. Moreover, we've also added in some content which was not immediately available for review back in early May versus what is available here today. Specifically, Appendix G, which is the Operations and Maintenance Summary section, now includes summary tables for different transit authorities, specifically the Metro West Regional Transit Authority and the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. The table for the MBTA should be added in very shortly, though we didn't have it immediately ready in an accessible format for today's presentation, but we do have it and it will be included imminently. In Appendix C, the main change there is that Appendix C, which is the summary of public comment, has included a table, which is Table C-1, which summarizes all comments that staff received during TIP development. It also includes Table C-2 now, which is a summary of all comments that staff received during the public comment period for this draft TIP, which, as I mentioned, began on, I believe, if I recall correctly, May 8th and conclude on May 29th. We can go on to the next slide. I'll speak very briefly to what the content of that public comment period was. If we can go on to the next slide as well, please. So to provide a sort of very brief summary of public comments here, again, this comment period began on May 8th and concluded on May 29th. The majority of the comments that were received during this window, specifically 4 letters, were submitted on behalf of the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, requesting an additional $6.25 million of funding in federal fiscal year 28 for the Blandon Hub Vehicle Maintenance and Fueling Facility Project. This included a letter from State Senator Karen Spilka's office, a joint letter from State Representatives Hogan, Lewis, Souza, and Gregoire, a letter from City of Framingham Mayor Charles Sisitsky, and a letter from the 495 Metro West Partnership. The 495 Metro West Partnership also submitted a second additional letter, which was providing more general comments on various projects and priorities across the entirety of the Interstate 495 corridor. That letter includes references to a few dozen different projects, so I will not be able to succinctly summarize anything for at least specific projects in this context, though that letter is included for full reference of the MPO board as well in the meeting materials. I will also note that besides these 5 letters, staff received one other public comment, which was from a resident in the town of Weston expressing support for the Route 30 reconstruction project. There have, I believe, also been one additional comment, but that was received after the close of the public comment period in support of that project, at least from what I saw last Friday. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide, and the next one, please. So with that in mind, including the changes that I alluded to earlier that have been proposed for this document, staff are requesting that the board vote to endorse the federal fiscal year's 2027-31 TIP as presented in its revised capacity. And if approved, this TIP will take effect on October 1st, 2026.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions for Ethan? Public comments? Motions? Anybody? Jimmy?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on the public comments that were received and on the Metro West Heavy Duty Maintenance Facility project. Obviously, it's probably a little late right now to get that project amended to be the 25 million in federal funds that we were originally hoping for that project, but we appreciate the consideration of this board and the chair and everyone else involved for potentially looking at that project again as we move down the road. We think it is a vital project for the region and for public transportation in the region. So just wanted to sort of say my appreciation for those public comments that were received and to this board and the chair for any considerations.
Thank you, Jim. Just on this issue on behalf of MassDOT, we are 100% in support of this. We also agree that it doesn't make sense to try to do this now, right? I mean, we need to get the tip out. But we expect that in the amendment process for this tip or the development of the next tip that we will figure out a way to fund the gap that we inadvertently miscommunicated that it should have been a $25 million federal project, not a $25 million total project. So we're 100% supportive, but we agree with you and thank you for not pushing this issue today. Anybody else? Dennis Giambetti and then Brad Rawson after that. Dennis Giambetti.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate Jim's comments. Also want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for having a discussion with Jim and looking through the issue and agreeing to look at it next year and not have it so much impactful this year as far as the changes that would have to be taken place. So I just wanted to thank you, and I hope the board supports this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Brad?
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate all the work that all parties have performed on this issue in partnership. Chair, this board speaks regularly about the importance of sub-regional equity. This board also speaks regularly about the importance of investing in transit and multimodalism, including our RTA partners, not just MBTA. The third thing we speak about, Chair, is the importance of clear, clean, and timely information sharing, project scoring, and constant process improvements. And I can't miss an opportunity, Chair, to remind us all how far we've come in these last couple of years. Partnerships between MassDOT, MBTA, RTAs, municipal project proponents. We are getting better every single year. I would ask this board and all of our members and partners to continue doing the work and not simply procrastinate until November, December when TIP season begins again, but to schedule time to work through our incredible TIP process committee and do the hard work in the summertime to make sure that we have ample time for project scoring, evaluation, clear understanding of scope, schedule, and risk, and get to an even better TIP process next winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Any other comments, questions, motions? Anybody? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve the TIP as presented today? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa with MAPC. I'll make a motion to approve the TIP as presented today.
Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't want to leave Eric hanging. Lynn Diggins from Arlington is happy to second and looking forward to working with Brad on the tipper this summer.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Certainly. Just clarifying that this is a motion to endorse the TIP.
Yes.
Eric. Roger. Okay. So calling David Moeller.
Yes.
Michael O'Dowd.
Mike O'Dowd, yes.
John Romano. Next, Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Jim Nee.
Jim Nee, yes.
Sarah Lee.
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski.
Hannah Switlikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly.
Caitlin Allen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey.
Patrick Hoey, yes.
Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kosis, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Robert Guptill.
Robert Guptill, yes.
Brad Rawson.
Brad Rawson, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
This motion to endorse the carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Ethan and team, for your work on the TIP this year. Excellent job as always. Next item on the agenda is the FY 26 to 30 TIP Amendment number 6. Ethan LaPointe again.
All right, thank you. So for my second presentation this morning, this next presentation is proposing Amendment 6 to the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 program, so the current program until October. If we can go on to the next slide, please. And the next slide. So this amendment, given we are quickly entering the summer, is an amendment where staff will be requesting a waived public comment period, specifically because we're approaching the end of federal fiscal year 2026, and there are a few projects that have been awarded either earmark or discretionary funding, which needs to be obligated before the end of this federal fiscal year expediently, lest it expire. Specifically, Amendment 6 includes 2 projects, one of which programs a federal earmark with some statewide highway funds to fill a gap between the total project cost estimate, this supporting the reconstruction of Allen Street in Braintree, and the other project being a flex of a federal highway funding ferryboat program funds, which are set to expire, to the MBTA to support the Catamaran ferry overhaul. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of this amendment, we will be requesting that the board votes to waive the public comment period for this amendment and endorse it as presented, without the comment period, because both of these changes are utilizing federal funds that will expire at the end of federal fiscal 26 and require some additional time to factor in approvals and other administrative activities to obligate this funding. I'll go into a little more detail on the next slide about these specific projects. If we can move to that slide, please. So the first project up on the docket is the reconstruction of Allen Street in Braintree. This project is one project, but has 2 different line item changes, given it is allocating funding in both the fiscal 26 earmark or discretionary program and the fiscal 26 statewide highway program. For the earmark or discretionary program, this project is listed with $3.94 million, representing a federal fiscal year 2023 transportation, housing, and urban development appropriation to reconstruct Allen Street from Shaw Street to Quincy Ave. This funding, given it was a 23 appropriation, will expire if not obligated before the end of 2026. The project's total cost estimate is $8.56 million approximately, and so that difference between the earmark amount plus the match for the earmark and that total cost estimate of about $4.6 million is also proposed for programming in the statewide highway program for fiscal 26. So again, that's about $4.6 million proposed. So between this change to the earmark program and also the statewide highway programs, this project will be newly programmed at that full $8.56 million cost estimate within the TIP under this amendment. Again, that earmark would be expiring at the end of fiscal 26 if not obligated. On the next slide, with a slightly different funding source, this next project is the Catamaran Overhaul Ferryboat Capital Program Funds, which would be a flex to the MBTA. This is a project that is using carryover funding. So this was funding that was allocated under prior federal fiscal years but not spent, carried over, and is now subject to expiration unless obligated at the end of federal fiscal year 26 after a few years of that carryover. This project is, again, proposed for new programming and would be proposed for funding of an additional $1.52 million to support the ongoing catamaran overhaul activities that the MBTA has been conducting. I'll also note for those that have been attending these meetings for some time across multiple TIPs, this is a similar action to what has been allocated under amendments in prior TIPs, such as the 2025-29 TIP for the catamaran overhaul. We can go on to the next slide. So MPO staff are requesting that the board votes to waive the public comment period for this amendment and endorse Amendment 6 as presented in order to ensure that these projects can advertise for bids within the next month and again before the end of the federal fiscal year or the end of FTA's federal fiscal year close on their different books for obligation. I will note that the MPO's current public engagement plan allows for this action, to vote to waive the comment period under circumstances where the board could take immediate action on extraordinary funding opportunities. And again, this sort of expiration of unobligated earmarks or discretionary funding does meet that definition. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on this amendment.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions for Ethan? Seeing none, can I get a motion to waive the public comment period and approve this amendment as presented today? And please make sure you state both those things in your motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa with MAPC. I'll make a motion to endorse TIP Amendment 6, waive the public comment period, and as presented today.
Thank you. Jim Nee.
Second that motion, Jim Nee.
Thank you. Motion have been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Mike O'Dowd,
Mike O'Dowd, yes.
John Romano, Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Jim Nee,
Jim Nee, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Anna Switlikowski,
Anna Switlikowski, yes.
Caitlin Allen Connolly,
Caitlin Allen Conley, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Patrick Hoey,
Patrick Hoey, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kosis, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Robert Guptill,
Robert Guptill, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Megan Roach,
Megan Roach, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
John Strauss,
John Strauss, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an introduction to the federal certification review process. Anthony Jones, Federal Highway Administration.
Good afternoon, everybody. David, do I have access to add myself in the presentation on?
I think you have access to run your own slides. Is that true?
If you have any issues, let me know.
Okay,
Should enable.
I am seeing the share screen now. Screen 2, sure. All right, everybody, just let me know if you're able to see my screen.
It's up, Anthony. We can see it.
Solid, love that. All right, so I was about to say good afternoon, but good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Jones. I'm the current program development team leader for Massachusetts Division of Federal Highways, but then also current acting duty deputy division administrator. But today I wanted to come and speak to you as far as introducing y'all into the process of the certification review that we kicked off back in May on the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, on May 8th, we sat and we talked with Tegan and the MPO board. Well, Tegan and some of your well-esteemed colleagues, as well as MassDOT, and then there's just some federal partners here in order to kick it off. So wanted to take this opportunity again to let you know what this process is about, what we will be looking for out of the policy board, and what we'll be conducting. Right. And so just a brief introduction to the federal team. The certification review is a partnership between both Federal Highways and FTA, which is the Federal Transit Administration. And so on our team that we currently have, you have Region 1, which the point of contact will be Brandon Burns. But then also we're having assistance from the Volpe Center. So Ms. Anna Benton, Kwame Tran, and Jake Butler will be assisting in reviewing the documentation, as well as being present on asking questions on the on-site visitation, which I'll discuss later. From the Federal Highway Division Office, it is myself as well as Nomelo, Rhonda Motley, and then our current summer intern, Mr. Tristan Altamy. So if you have any questions or concerns about the process or to follow up after this, please reach out to myself or Brandon or those so that your questions can be answered. Right. And so basically what the purpose of today's meeting is that we'll talk about the purpose of the TMA certification review, the process, the roles, the timeline, any expectations. Why does it matter to the MPO policy board? And then also just the federal requirements that, that all TMAs must go through every 4 years, and how this is tied to continued receipt to your funding, your federal planning and capital funds, right? And this is just an opportunity, for in general to highlight any accomplishments or to address challenges that your program or MPO is experiencing throughout these past years. And so what is the certification review? Basically, it is a required review of all TMAs with populations greater than 200,000 per the 23 U.S. codification. It is a joint effort between FHWA and FTA to look at your planning processes, which is laid out through the codification of 23 CFR, as well as just the assessing of your compliance, identify any best practices that you're currently performing so that we can put them on a national scale, and any recommendations for improvement. I always like to let people know that this is not a pass-fail audit type of thing, but it's more of a certification that is required for continued eligibility for receiving funding. So anything to nature on your UPWPs, your STIP tips, things to that nature to help things move forward. Just based on the federal legal and regulatory frameworks, as I mentioned, a lot of things that the MPO and the process that y'all do come out of 23 USC 134, which is basically your metropolitan transportation planning process, which then also goes into your planning regulations of 23 CFR 450, as well as any other bill acts that are currently coming through, such as FAST Act, EJA, and bill, and then the upcoming build authorization that is to come. And so this all ties into the relationship of your planning documents, as you may know, as we just discussed with the UPWPs, your TIP, your RTP, which is your regional transportation plans, other called metropolitan transportation plans, your public participation plans, Title VI, and then any of your performance measures and metrics and managements. And so through this, it's just a key takeaway is that you as a policy board, as you know, are accountable, is embedded within these regulations to ensure that you provide the best and update information for your communities, and to speak on what projects you would like to see happen and prioritize them correctly. All right. So as the policy board, we know that is ultimately your responsibility to help out the MPO and guide them in the right direction for the planning processes. This certification review will assess your oversight as well as your strategic direction, and then also your decision-making processes through either interviews as well as through the planning documents that your staff is working on a daily basis. All right. And so, with the areas, as we know, that the policy board is focused on, it's basically setting your regional vision, and your priorities, ensuring that transportation decision-making is transparent, and then as well as overseeing the performance-based planning and fiscal constraints, right? And then also adopting and ensuring that all plans and documents are compliant with our federal regulations. All right. And so basically as a phase overview, just to give you a brief understanding of what the whole process is looking like and going to look like. We have 5 major phases. Basically the scoping phase, your desk review and pre-site analysis. Then we'll come to a site visit and public engagement phase. And then once we complete out the site visit and public engagement, we'll do a debrief of findings and developments, and then we'll set out to write a final report, and then list out your certification determination. Currently, we are in the desk review and pre-site analysis phase. As of last Friday, I received all requested documentation from the MPO, which includes all of your tips, all of your UPWPs for this year and the past year, as well as your travel demand modeling, data and analysis, Title VI, as well as certifications, agreements, and things to that nature. And so I do appreciate your staff for providing that over to us. We'll take the next 2 months, maybe 2 months and a half, in order to review this documentation, to ensure that, one, it follows federal rules and regulations, that it complies, and then also to drum up any questions that we see that may need to be addressed, and then also look for areas for improvement, so where we can come on the day of the certification review on site and provide out any best practices or notes of improvement that we can see to help the MPO. All right. So basically, phase 1 is the preparation. It is just that self-assessment of the documentations, the coordination between the MPOs, the state DOT, as well as our federal partners. We do our scheduling, scoping, and site visits, and the agendas. During this particular phase, the policy board, we just ask that you support to have all the key documents be accessible, ensure that your leadership is available for potential interviews or discussions, as well as engaging early in strengthening the areas for particular improvement. Desk review, as I mentioned, is just going to do exactly what I mentioned, as far as examining the planning documents from your regional tip, your regional transportation plan, your tips, your UPWPs, and et cetera. And this will be focused on just the compliance, the integration, and then also performance-based planning. And then on phase 3, this is typically a site visit. We either have a 1-day or a 2-day session. Recently, in the past, we've just been kind of holding it to a 1-day session because we're going to a more risk-based, streamlined approach. And so hopefully a 1-day will be suffice enough for us in order to do both meetings, interviews, and any presentations. During this on-site, discussions will be held with both the MPO staff, the policy board members, state DOT, transit operators, and partners, and then also the public as well too. Coming out of phase 4, this is basically our findings and developments, where both the federal partners, we draft our findings based on the desk audit, as well as the site reviews when we had conversations with y'all and the MPO. Out of this, we'll come up with either accommodations for notable best practices, recommendations for opportunities of improvement, and then corrective actions where compliance issues were required in order to maintain your certification. And based on after that, we'll have the conversation with y'all in order to review. And so these commendations, recommendations, or corrective actions to provide any clarification before we finalize our report. Okay. And then, With that, we walk into phase 5, which is just the final report and determination, where we draft out a final report. We have 60 days in order to do that report, and then take time in order to summarize all of our discussions during the review, that include both the commendation recommendations and corrective actions that we have found. And then we place a determination on your transportation planning process, where either A, you're certified, B, you're certified subject to corrective actions, or you're certified for not use of certain construction funding categories, as well as not being certified at all. So the more corrective actions that you have, the higher the scale goes in that situation. All right. Some key takeaways for policy board members is to know that the certification reviews are just a strategic opportunity. They're just not a compliance check. Policy board leaders, we are looking for you to have good leadership and engagement during this process as well. To start preparation early and align the recommendations once they are provided through the report with your MPOs to prioritize along the way. And then also you just leverage any accommodations to showcase your regional success once we do have those. All right, some of the next steps that we are currently in the process of doing. As I mentioned, we're currently conducting a joint desk review of your planning materials and products. We are beginning to schedule out internal meetings with our federal partners, as well as external meetings with the with the MPO staff, as well as the state, in order to determine when the public review sessions will begin. To be determined, we're shooting for public involvement sessions to be in August. Also, at that point in time, I do like to leave it open for, any policy board member, if they would like to sit down, have a conversation with us about the program. You can do that as well between the months of August and September. And then in September, to be determined as well, is going to be the on-site review. And then by January 27, 2027, we will have a finalized report that will be issued out for your consumption and review. And then also at that point in time, we will have a debrief of all of our findings and present them back to the policy board once the report is finished. And so at this time, I just want to take any quick questions or comments or concerns that anyone may have about the process. But I certainly do look forward to, working with y'all and producing a great report and seeing what y'all have to offer.
Thank you, Anthony. Any questions for Anthony? Eric Barassa.
Anthony, thank you so much. Really appreciate this overview and your involvement. Sorry if I missed this. When in terms of the timeline that you've laid out, when do you think it will be completed?
And so I am anticipating that in December, we will be completed out. It's just that month of December, with all the holidays and things, just giving it just a little leeway to finalize the report so that we can present it out to y'all in January. But I have a drop dead date of December 15th to have you fully certified with a letter certification, and so that you can continue your planning processes without any issues and hiccups. So at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
And
Jen
Jim.
Rowe.
Yeah.
Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. It looks like the timing of the of our engagement as a board was in September. I just wanted to, and I'd heard maybe something about the week after Labor Day. Just wanted to note that that's like a time period that a lot of folks often take off because of the holiday. So if it's possible to kind of, avoid that particular week, it would probably be best.
No, certainly. During our kickoff meeting, we did have that discussion that I'm going to use that as a blackout week. So it'll probably be mid-September, a little bit after, if not pushing into late August, if possible. But definitely we are aware of the holidays, and then also cognizant of anybody's travels and vacations at those points in time as well too. I know myself personally, I'm going to take some trips, so I want to be as fresh as possible. So we're good to go.
Any other questions for Anthony? Seeing none. Thank you, Anthony.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time, and y'all have a great day.
You too, man. Next item on the agenda is scenario planning on the RTP, but Dave, you need to take back the screen. There you go. Introduction to long-range transportation plan scenario planning, Erin McGuire.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin McGuire. I am a transportation planner on staff to the Boston Region MPO, and I'm leading the development of our next long-range plan, abbreviated as LRTP, also known as the RTP or MTP. Thank you, Anthony, for letting us use all of the acronyms today. Review the content of our vision, goals, and objectives that help to guide the MPO's planning decisions. Today, we're going to be talking about a separate optional process that MPOs are able to opt into during our long-range planning activities. This is designed to help us better understand and explore the potential ramifications of different futures, also known as scenario planning. I'm here today with my colleague, help to provide you all with some introductions into our scenario planning efforts, including the main tool that we're using to support this, which is our travel demand model. If we could go to the next slide. Today, we're going to review a handful of topics that are related to scenario planning, the travel demand model, and also preview the type of discussion that we're hoping to hear from you all during our upcoming workshop. Next slide. So the main goal of my presentation today is to provide you all with some initial context about the approach that we recommend engaging with during a scenario planning exercise. We want to introduce you all to questions that are connected to the travel demand model, and then also preview the questions that we'll be designing the workshop around. Most notably, we wanted to highlight again that you guys are invited to an in-person workshop to sort of go further into the scenario planning exercise. It is scheduled for Tuesday, June 16th from 1 to 2:30 in the State Transportation Building, 10 Park Plaza, in Conference Room 1. Staff will be outside the conference room ready to help you find it if need be. And we really look forward to hearing the different types of conversations that may come from that. If we could go on to the next slide. So before going any further into this presentation, I wanted to provide you all with a baseline definition as to what scenario planning is, especially in this context. The definition I always refer back to comes from the Federal Highway Administration, and it defines it as a strategic planning approach to develop, compare, and test different scenarios or stories about what the future might look like. It's important to note that no two approaches to scenario planning are exactly the same, and each of them are tailored to meet the specific needs of the MPO that is engaging in the process. And it really just gives us an interesting framework to have some discussions. If we could go to the next slide. The images on this screen are representative of two separate approaches that are used to producing projections looking into the future. The detailed painting on the left is representative of a predictive projection, while the more abstract mountains on the right represent an exploratory approach. The predictive projections create a detailed picture of the anticipated future that we're going towards using existing trends. Should present conditions or future plans change, a new predictive projection would need to be created as those past assumptions are no longer appropriate. This approach is what we use to help develop our air quality and disparate impact disproportionate burden analyses after the final projects are identified and selected to be included in the fiscally constrained portion of our long-range plan. Meanwhile, an exploratory approach to projections has rapidly expanded as a framework that many of our peer MPOs are using to contend with an uncertain future that's before us. When developing exploratory projections, we consider the possibility of a handful of uncertain future forces. This allows us to compare potential futures against one another, providing an opportunity to identify strategies that are desirable in various future conditions. Another benefit of this process is that it allows us as an MPO to consider uncertain future forces before we need to make immediate. Both of these approaches are done using the regional travel demand model, and at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Marty Milkovits to provide some other additional context about the model itself. If we could go on to the next slide.
Thanks, Aaron. I hope you all can hear me okay. Hi, Marty Milkovits. I'm the Director of Modeling here at the Boston MPO. I'll talk to you a bit about one of the tools that we'll use to support this scenario planning exercise. I was thinking about continuing the analogy of Aaron's mountains and being like, oh, the model is like a canvas, and the inputs are like paint and maybe the brush. But then through that analogy, I become an artist, which I am not really going to comfortably proclaiming myself as. So we'll just leave that analogy alone and talk about the model directly. And so a travel demand model takes in inputs from essentially all of you. We're taking in the planned projects, the new service plans for transit, as well as estimates of how land use will change, where population, households, and employment will be and develop across our region. And as you can see, the model actually covers the entire state, as well as southeastern New Hampshire and all over Rhode Island. Now, where we do this larger broader set to get better information about the many travelers going to within and to and from the Boston region, but we can focus our analysis and look at the metrics just from any sub area, specifically the Boston region here. So some of the details about this model was first developed for the 2023 Long Range Transportation Plan, and it is the model of record for any applications. So any environmental impact statements, when you need to use a travel demand model and the adopted projections, this is the tool for that. This model represents average weekday, so kind of like a spring, fall, non-holiday, schools in session, weather's okay. It is a trip-based model, which is basically just there to let you know it doesn't have all the capabilities of some travel demand models, but it has some definite advantages, especially for scenario planning, that it runs very quickly and it's easy to modify things and represent different assumptions and different inputs. But I also want to highlight here that because of our time frame, it's best to use the tools they have readily available, but we have other tools available. And as Aaron mentioned, there's many different approaches to scenario planning. So potential co-stars that may come up are our recently developed Boston Region Stops model, which is focused on transit ridership estimates. We also have Conveil, the accessibility model that I think you've seen in other studies. And also sometimes a model can just be Excel, and it can be different assumptions around rates, but models are there to help get us some more insight into our questions. So we go to the next slide. And so just a little more details about this particular model, which we call TDM23. As I mentioned, it was developed for the 2023 LRTP. So as we developed it, when we're looking for what is a reasonable base year, now base year is important in a model. Essentially, that's what we calibrate the model to. That's where we take observations and fit the model parameters such that we reproduce those observations. And in 2023, the best data or most recent data we could have gotten might have been 2022, 2021. The trouble is then we would be essentially asserting that when we are forecasting that the travel behavior of 2021, 2022 is what we are expecting to see in 2050. So that was very challenging. In the midst of COVID, we did not expect it to continue. Did we expect it to be pre-COVID? That was essentially a better assumption than trying to grab something within the midst of it. I mean, now here we are in 2026, and are we in a new normal? Is it going to keep changing? Again, these are the types of questions that I think we can get into as part of a scenario planning exercise. We have developed several follow-on versions of TDM23. We're currently on version 2.1, so continued refinement, and we are working on a post-pandemic scenario and version using the recently completed household survey from MassDOT, which is a great wealth of information and something that is really key to updating the model and capturing the post-pandemic behavior. And something I want to mention, I mentioned the 2050 forecast. So it's important to kind of recognize that we're saying the year 2050, but it doesn't mean the model's predicting 2050. The year is important because as we're gathering all the projections, what projects would be completed by a certain year? What would the transit service plans be in that year? How will the population and workforce and employment evolve by this year? But all of these are the inputs to the model, so we need to have the year to represent that. But especially when we're thinking about scenario planning, we're going to really break away from that predictive and, okay, this is that one future that we're going to work towards, and into how things could be different. And that's where that time frame is useful to think about how different it could be over the 24 years coming. So just to give you a little bit more grounding in what a travel demand model does, using these inputs, if we go to the next slide, I've laid out the structures as a series of questions. And here I'm focusing on the demand side of the model. There's a supply side that we'll talk about next. So I've listed out these questions, and I've actually kind of anchored them towards an individual, not exactly how the model works, but I think it can be useful in walking through it. So essentially the inputs and the initialization steps of the model, this is answering those kinds of questions for people of who are you and where do you live? So this is basically saying we're going to have a table of households and the size of those households, the workers in that household, each individual, their age, their worker or student status. Then for each of those households, the model answers the question of how many vehicles are available to this household. And we really distinguish them by, are they zero vehicle households? Are there some? And if there are some, are there as many vehicles as there are drivers in the household? That answers the question of how much does a worker commute to the office for work? And then from the whole household, how many trips are they making across different purposes, work, school, personal business, social recreation, and so on. Now we have the number of trips that households are making. Where do they go? Now we know where they go. How do they get there? So this is our mode choice is one of the core components. And basically here is where the model is estimating how many of trips between, zones A to B for work purposes by households of a certain vehicle availability are driving alone, using a shared ride, taking transit. Are they walking to transit? Are they driving and using a park and ride? Are they walking or biking or using a TNC? Then with this information, we say, okay, how do they travel across the time of day? And then finally, how are they actually routing their way through the network? So driving, like what streets are you taking? Using transit, what services? Where are you boarding? Where are you transferring, alighting, and walking, or using a car on those different legs? So now to talk about the supply side of the model in the next slide. So on the supply side, answering questions, from the land use side of that, like I said, where are the households? So now we think of like, okay, rather than an individual, step back across the entire region, where are households, population, and jobs distributed, and by what type? For the roadway network, so representation of our streets in the region, essentially this is answering that question of how far between 2 points, how far is it by automobile? Now the far is both time and cost. And also it tells us about how congested the experience is in traveling by car. Similarly for transit, how far by transit, and it's time, but it's time walking, it's time waiting, it's time in vehicle, and the fare for transit. We also have an active mode network, so to answer better that question about how far walking or biking. And then finally, this availability for between 2 points, the model has definitions of is walking or biking available, primarily determined by the distance between those 2 points. And also, if you're going to use a TNC, an Uber, Lyft, or taxi, what are the wait times? What are the fares? And those sorts of things. So I might have lost you in going through those different questions. So I have a more abstract step back slide next to just kind of talk about the big model components. And again, to reiterate, I want to make all of you modelers, but that's not the goal of this exercise. What I'm trying to do is give you enough of the structure of the model so that when you're thinking about the questions, we can help make that translation into the tool and be able to study and learn more about it. So at the highest level, like the one thing I want you to take away from this talk around the model is these major components. So essentially what a model is, it takes in inputs. That's our land use, our roadway network, transit service plans, and it takes in a theory or assumptions. And essentially it's how are those inputs related? So given that households are here, employment is there, and this is how long it takes to drive versus transit, what will the trips be like, on that network? That's where our theory and assumptions comes in. And so that is what we use the household survey to develop. Essentially, these are interacted on a model platform. So that is the special software to do it, and it produces some results. So metrics like Aaron mentioned, we have our equity metrics, air quality metrics, congestion, transit ridership, and so on. And what I really like to include on this slide is the stakeholder piece. So not explicitly part of, the model, the software, but if you have a model and you don't have a stakeholder, you don't have a tool, you have a toy, right? It's fun to play with, but it's not actually doing anything. So the stakeholder is a key part. And what we're doing in the scenario planning exercise is identifying the needs of stakeholders. And so these are the kinds of things that we're concerned about, the things we want to explore more and better understand. But then, the trade-off to stakeholders, you don't get answers from a model, you get insights. So we don't ask a model a question and say, "No, the model told me this. Okay, now I know, and I'll do the thing." It's not going to say good decision, bad decision. It's going to give us information, help us better understand this complex system of our transportation network. So I hope that was helpful. I mean, I want to set expectations too that this travel demand model does a lot, answers a lot of questions, but certainly you will have more questions than this model can answer. But I want to really hear those questions because we're constantly improving and developing our models. New data sets are becoming available. And so the better we can understand the new needs and questions from you all, the better we can make the next generation tools. So I think with that, I'll hand it back to Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. If we could go on to the next slide. Just as we begin wrapping up today, I wanted to give you all a very advanced preview of the types of questions that we will be asking you to engage with during the workshop itself. So first, we'll be asking you to reflect on different driving forces or uncertain future trends that we can anticipate might impact our transportation system and that we as an MPO might need to respond to. The next question that comes from that is what types of levers should the MPO respond to if these forces were to actuate and grow into the future? And then how are we measuring success? What does a successful transportation system look like in 2050? What are the end outcomes that we're really looking for here? So again, these are the main questions of the workshop. I invite you to spend some time sitting with this. If we could go on to the next slide, please. I also wanted to just give you all a highlight of some next steps that you can anticipate over the next year or so. So our immediate first next step is to host this workshop and get a better idea from you all as to the types of futures that we should be considering in our modeling efforts. After that, we will figure out what is possible to then translate into our travel demand model. And then we'll begin iterating some updates to that model, develop some insights, and get back to you all with our interpretations of that starting around 2027. So with all of that, I'd like to thank you all. If there are any questions related to the process, we can definitely try to identify and work on those now. If it's related to the workshop questions, I invite you to hold on to those so we can have a good discussion in a week and a half, 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron or Marty? Caitlin, Alan Connolly.
Thank you so much. This is incredibly helpful. And forgive me as I get these processes and timelines a little bit confused sometimes, but how does this match up with the MBTA's sort of long-term transportation plan and the work that they're doing? Is it happening at the same time? I know you just mentioned the dates and I'm just wondering, that's why. But this was a great presentation, so thank you.
Aaron, Sandy, somebody want to talk about how the PMT and the LRTP relate to each other? Somebody's got to answer, Caitlin. Go ahead, Aaron.
I see Sandy.
Okay.
So I'll point to him and then I can follow
Okay,
up
Sandy's got his hand up.
afterwards.
Thank you, Sandy.
So I'll defer to staff on the LRTP timeline. For us, for the PMT, we're looking to wrap that up next summer. So I think we're going to be done before the LRTP is done. We've been in active dialogue with staff about scenario planning and about how the two processes relate to one another. And, I think a lot of details left to be hashed out and worked out, but we'll be providing data as necessary and really looking to be collaborative in that process.
Aaron, you got anything you want to add?
No, well said.
John Strauss.
Thanks, David. I just had a fast question for Aaron, and not to go into a lot of detail, but I was looking at what is an uncertainty test?
Very good question. That's essentially just a fancy way of saying messing with the inputs of the travel demand model itself. So those different questions that Marty was walking us through earlier, thinking along those lines, how would one modification to the future then cause some ripple effects? I would also welcome Marty if he has some other thoughts there.
Yeah, if I could add some, thanks. So in the workshops, will be a series of questions around what are concerns, and uncertainties are often used to identify those things that would affect the outcome of a decision, whether it's a good decision or not, but we don't have control over them. So it might be, we think about changes in employment, or think about changes in availability of TNCs, automated vehicles. So identifying those uncertainties and then thinking about, well, how well will transit and mode shift and these other metrics that we care about. So the tests here, I think it's getting a better understanding. That's where the model can be really useful, is rather than just like, okay, yeah, if TNCs are cheaper, then fewer people ride transit. Well, is that generally true? Is it in certain areas? So this is, I think, this bullet's meant to just kind of capture that cycle of better defining the concern for everyone here on the board, and then looking at different metrics. So basically coming at it from different angles and thinking about what are the implications to our decisions from that.
Great, thank you very much.
General.
Yes, thank you. I was actually just gonna ask a similar question to what Sheila asked about in the chat about if the workshop is open to the public. That's great to know that it is. I guess one maybe follow-up question for staff is just, is there anything we should keep in mind about getting the word out about it, just for capacity reasons?
Darren? Kagan?
I think the room has a capacity of about 35 people. So maybe try to keep it to those most directly connected to the MPO, but I would also be remiss to say that this is not a great opportunity to have some engaging conversations.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, guys. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any today? Lynn Diggins.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a curiosity question that didn't ask me earlier on, but maybe you or Ethan can point me to a source where I can understand how unobligated funds work and when they expire. Because on the amendment, Ethan mentioned that we needed to program some funds before they expired. And I just want to get just a handle on it. It's just an intellectual curiosity, Mr. Chair. So that's all. I'll probably send Ethan an email, but if you can answer that now, that'd be fine.
Well, yeah, I can give you a general answer.
Yeah.
All funds have an obligation period of which you have to obligate them. They are different by funding source. So like if the ones we did today, like an earmark may be obligated. Sometimes earmarks are available until obligated. They have no drop date. Sometimes they have a 2-year drop date. Sometimes they have a 3-year drop date. So they are very specific, but generally for like our general formula programs and our transit programs, there is like, I think it's generally 4 years of which you have to, within 4 years, you have to obligate the annual funding.
Okay. Just understand that it's variable. By program is helpful enough. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Anybody? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, MAPC, great meeting today. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Lynn Diggins.
I second Eric's assessment of the meeting, and that's it.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any objections? Without objection, we are adjourned. I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.